The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Wellington's penthouse office, each drop creating rivulets that distorted the city lights 30 floors below. The sound should have been soothing, but tonight it felt ominous, like nature itself was trying to warn him of something. Marcus sat behind his mahogany desk, the surface polished to such perfection that it reflected the amber glow of his banker's lamp. Papers were scattered across the leather-inlaid surface, contracts and legal documents that represented months of negotiations, millions of dollars, and what he believed would be the crowning achievement of his business empire. At 42, Marcus had built Wellington Industries from nothing into a multinational corporation worth billions. He had the Midas touch, everyone said, turning every venture into gold. Tonight's signing would cement his legacy, a merger that would make him one of the most powerful men in the country. The documents before him represented a partnership with Blackstone Enterprises, a deal so lucrative it seemed almost too good to be true. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9 times, its deep resonant tone echoing through the spacious office. Marcus glanced at his Patek Philippe watch, confirming the time. The signing ceremony was scheduled for tomorrow morning, but he wanted to review everything one final time. Perfectionism had gotten him this far, and he wasn't about to let anything slip through the cracks now. A soft knock interrupted his concentration. "Come in," he called, not looking up from the documents. The door opened to reveal Sarah Chun, his assistant for the past 8 years. She was efficient, loyal, and one of the few people Marcus trusted completely. Behind her stood a small figure that made Marcus's heart skip a beat. "Mr. Wellington," Sarah said softly, "I'm sorry to disturb you, but Emma insisted on seeing you. She said it was urgent." Emma Rodriguez stepped out from behind Sarah, her dark eyes wide with concern. At 8 years old, she barely reached Marcus's waist, but her presence filled the room with an energy that never failed to amaze him. Her long black hair was slightly disheveled, as if she'd been running, and she clutched a worn teddy bear against her chest. "Emma, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice immediately softening as he rose from his chair. "What are you doing here so late? You should be home with your grandmother." Emma had come into Marcus's life 3 years ago under tragic circumstances. Her mother, Sofia Rodriguez, had been one of his most valued employees, working as a translator and cultural liaison for his international divisions. When Sofia was killed in a car accident, she left behind 8-year-old Emma with no family except an elderly grandmother who could barely make ends meet. Marcus had stepped in without hesitation, not just providing financial support, but becoming a father figure to the little girl who had lost everything. The arrangement had surprised everyone who knew Marcus. He was known as a ruthless businessman, someone who kept his personal and professional lives completely separate. But something about Emma had broken through his carefully constructed walls. Perhaps it was her resilience in the face of tragedy, or the way she looked at the world with wonder despite everything she'd been through. Whatever it was, Marcus found himself caring for her in a way he'd never expected to care for anyone. "I had a bad dream," Emma said, her voice small but determined. "Abuela said I could call you, but when I did, Sarah said you were still working. I asked her to bring me here because I needed to see you." Marcus felt a pang of guilt. He'd been so focused on the merger that he'd barely seen Emma in the past week. "I'm sorry, little one. I know I've been busy lately, but after tomorrow, things will calm down. I promise." Emma stepped closer to his desk, her eyes scanning the papers spread across its surface. "What are all these papers, Marcus?" "Just some business documents," he said, moving around the desk to kneel beside her. "Very boring grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." But Emma wasn't satisfied with that answer. She'd always been precocious, asking questions that often surprised adults with their insight. "Are they important?" "Very important," Marcus admitted. "They're about a big business deal that could change everything for our company." Emma nodded solemnly, as if she understood the weight of what he was saying. Then, without warning, she broke away from him and darted toward the desk. "Emma, wait," Marcus started, but she was already at the desk, her small hands reaching for the papers. "Don't sign those papers," she shouted suddenly, her voice echoing through the office with surprising force. "Please, Marcus, don't sign them." Marcus was taken aback by the intensity in her voice. Sarah stepped forward, ready to gently guide Emma away from the desk, but Marcus held up a hand to stop her. "Emma, what's wrong?" he asked, genuinely concerned. Why don't you want me to sign these papers? The little girl's eyes filled with tears, and she hugged her teddy bear tighter. I don't know, she said, her voice breaking. I just have a feeling. A really bad feeling. In my dream, you signed papers, and then everything went wrong. You were sad, and I couldn't find you anymore. Marcus felt his heart clench. Emma had always been sensitive, sometimes seeming to pick up on things that adults missed. He'd learned to pay attention to her instincts, even when they seemed to come from nowhere. Sweetheart, he said gently, dreams aren't real. They're just our minds processing things while we sleep. These papers are going to help us, not hurt us. But Emma shook her head vigorously. No, Marcus, please. I know you think I'm just a little kid, but I have feelings about things sometimes, and they're usually right. Remember when I told you not to go to that meeting last month because I had a bad feeling? And then your car broke down and you missed it. But it turned out the other people were trying to trick you. Marcus remembered. Emma had begged him not to go to a meeting with potential investors, claiming she had a bad feeling about it. He'd dismissed it at first, but when his car wouldn't start and he missed the meeting, he later discovered that the investors were fraudsters who had been trying to embezzle money from several companies. The coincidence had been unsettling, but he'd chalked it up to luck. That was different, Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. This deal has been thoroughly vetted. I have lawyers, accountants, investigators. Everyone has looked at this from every angle. Emma stepped closer to the papers, her small finger pointing at the contract. But have you looked at it? Really looked at it? Not just the big words, but all the little words too. Marcus frowned. Of course he'd read the contract. He'd read it dozens of times. But something in Emma's tone made him pause. She had a way of cutting through complexity with simple observations that often revealed truths that adults missed. I've read every page, he said. But even as he spoke, he found himself looking at the documents with fresh eyes. Read it again, Emma pleaded. Please, Marcus. For me. Read it like you're looking for something hidden. Sarah cleared her throat softly. Mr. Wellington, perhaps we should get Emma home. It's quite late and… No, Marcus said, surprising himself. It's okay, Sarah. Emma's right about one thing. I should take one more careful look at these documents before tomorrow. He moved back to his desk and picked up the contract, a thick document bound in blue legal backing. Emma climbed into the chair across from his desk, settling her teddy bear in her lap and watching him intently. Marcus began to read, but this time he found himself paying attention to details he'd previously glossed over. The main terms of the merger were exactly as he'd expected. Blackstone Enterprises would acquire a 49% stake in Wellington Industries in exchange for their manufacturing facilities and distribution networks. It would give Marcus access to markets he'd never been able to penetrate while maintaining majority control of his company. But as he read deeper into the document, guided by Emma's insistence that he look for hidden things, Marcus began to notice clauses that seemed oddly specific. There were provisions about operational oversight and strategic realignment that he'd assumed were standard legal language. Now, reading them more carefully, he realized they were far more invasive than typical merger terms. What does this part mean? Emma asked, pointing to a section near the bottom of page 12. Marcus read the paragraph she was indicating. It dealt with management succession protocols and included language about competency evaluations and leadership transitions. The wording was dense and filled with legal jargon, but as Marcus parsed it carefully, a chill ran down his spine. This section, he said slowly. It seems to give Blackstone the right to evaluate my performance as CEO and potentially remove me if they determine I'm not meeting certain standards. But I thought you said you were keeping control of your company, Emma said, her 8-year-old logic cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Marcus felt his blood begin to run cold. He flipped through the pages more urgently now, looking for other clauses he might have missed. On page 18, he found another troubling provision buried in a section about asset optimization. The language was deliberately obscure, but it appeared to give Blackstone significant control over Wellington Industries' intellectual property and trade secrets. Sarah, Marcus called, his voice tight with growing concern. Get David Chun on the phone. I don't care what time it is. David Chun was Marcus's lead attorney, a Harvard-educated lawyer who specialized in corporate mergers. If anyone could make sense of these clauses, it would be him. While Sarah made the call, Marcus continued reading with Emma watching silently from across the desk. The little girl seemed to sense the shift in his mood. her earlier agitation replaced by a solemn attentiveness that was remarkable for someone her age. "Mr. Chun is on line 1, Sarah announced. Marcus grabbed the phone. "David, I need you to walk me through sections 12 and 18 of the Blackstone merger agreement. The management succession protocols and asset optimization clauses." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Marcus, we've been over this contract a dozen times. Those are standard provisions." "Humor me," Marcus interrupted. "Explain them to me like I'm 8 years old." He glanced at Emma as he said this, and she gave him a small smile that somehow managed to be both encouraging and worried at the same time. David sighed. "Okay, let me pull up the document. Section 12, the Management Succession Protocols. This gives Blackstone the right to request a performance review of key management personnel, including the CEO, if they believe there are operational inefficiencies or strategic misalignments." "And what constitutes inefficiency or misalignment?" Marcus asked. That's somewhat subjective. The contract specifies that such determinations would be made by a joint committee consisting of representatives from both companies. A committee where Blackstone has equal representation despite owning only 49%. Another pause. "Yes, but Marcus, this is fairly standard language. It's meant to protect their investment." "What about Section 18? Asset optimization. This allows for the strategic reallocation of intellectual property and proprietary technologies to maximize operational efficiency across both organizations." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "In plain English, David, it means they can move your patents, trade secrets, and proprietary processes to their facilities if they determine it would be more efficient." The phone felt heavy in Marcus's hand. "And once those assets are moved to their facilities, what's to stop them from using the management succession clause to remove me and then keeping everything?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "David," Marcus prompted. "Marcus, I think we need to meet first thing in the morning, before the signing." Marcus hung up the phone and looked across the desk at Emma, who was watching him with those dark, knowing eyes that seemed far too old for her 8-year-old face. "You saw it, didn't you?" she said softly. "The bad thing hidden in the papers." Marcus nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of gratitude and bewilderment. "How did you know, Emma? How could you possibly have known?" Emma shrugged, a gesture that was both childlike and somehow ancient. "I don't know how I know things sometimes. Mama used to say I had a gift, but it scared her sometimes. She said I could see things that others couldn't see, feel things that others couldn't feel." Marcus remembered Sophia mentioning Emma's unusual intuition, but he'd assumed it was just a mother's pride in her daughter's intelligence. Now he was beginning to understand that it might be something more. "After Mama died," Emma continued, "the feelings got stronger, like she was still trying to protect me, you know? And now I feel like she wants me to protect you too." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. He came around the desk and knelt beside Emma's chair, taking her small hands in his larger ones. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for insisting that I look closer. Thank you for caring enough to have a bad feeling about something you couldn't possibly understand." Emma smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the carefree 8-year-old she should be. That's what families do, right? They protect each other. The word family hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd never thought of their relationship in those terms before, but Emma was right. Somewhere along the way, without him even realizing it, they had become a family. Not through blood or marriage, but through choice and care and the kind of love that transcends traditional definitions. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's exactly what families do." Sarah, who had been quietly observing the exchange, stepped forward. "Mr. Wellington, what do you want to do about tomorrow's signing?" Marcus stood up, his mind racing through the implications of what he'd discovered. Blackstone Enterprises wasn't looking for a partnership. They were executing a sophisticated takeover disguised as a merger. They would use the management succession clause to remove him once they had access to his company's assets and intellectual property. It was brilliant, ruthless, and completely legal. "Cancel it," he said firmly. "Call Blackstone first thing in the morning and tell them the deal is off. Sir, the cancellation penalties alone will cost millions, and there could be lawsuits." "I don't care about the money, Sarah. Emma just saved me from losing everything that really matters." He looked down at the little girl, who was now hugging her teddy bear and yawning. The late hour and emotional intensity were finally catching up with her. "Come on, sweetheart. Marcus said gently. Let's get you home to your grandmother. It's way past your bedtime. As they prepared to leave, Marcus took one last look at the contract that had nearly cost him everything. The papers that had seemed so promising just hours ago now looked sinister, filled with legal landmines that would have destroyed not just his company, but his ability to provide for Emma and her grandmother. The ride to Emma's apartment was quiet, the little girl dozing against Marcus's shoulder in the back of his car. As they drove through the city streets, Marcus found himself thinking about the strange turns his life had taken. 3 years ago, he'd been a confirmed bachelor, focused solely on building his business empire. The idea of caring for a child, of putting someone else's needs before his own ambitions, would have seemed impossible. But Emma had changed everything. She'd taught him that success wasn't just about money or power. It was about the people you chose to love and protect. Tonight, she'd returned the favor, protecting him from a threat he'd been too blind to see. When they arrived at the modest apartment building where Emma lived with her grandmother, Marcus carried the sleeping child up 3 flights of stairs. Maria Rodriguez, Emma's grandmother, was waiting in the doorway, her weathered face creased with worry. I'm sorry she bothered you so late, Maria said in accented English, reaching for Emma. She woke up crying about bad dreams and insisted she had to see you. She didn't bother me, Marcus assured her, gently transferring Emma to her grandmother's arms. She actually helped me more than she'll ever know. Maria studied his face with the same intuitive intelligence that Emma possessed. She has her mother's gift, she said quietly. Sophia could always sense when something was wrong, even when she was Emma's age. It runs in our family, this ability to feel things others cannot. Marcus nodded, finally beginning to understand the depth of what had happened tonight. I'm grateful for it. Emma may have just saved my company. She cares for you very much, Maria said. You have given her stability and love when she needed it most. She sees you as her father now, even if the papers don't say so. The words hit Marcus with unexpected force. He'd known that Emma was important to him, but hearing it stated so plainly made him realize how much his feelings had evolved. He did love her like a daughter, and the thought of anything happening to her, or to his ability to care for her, was unbearable. Maria, he said impulsively, I want to make this official. I want to adopt Emma, if you and she would be okay with that. The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears. She would be so happy, she whispered. And Sophia? Sophia would be so grateful to know her daughter has found a true father. As Marcus drove home through the empty streets, he reflected on the evening's events. In the span of a few hours, his entire world had shifted. He'd almost lost everything to a sophisticated corporate trap, been saved by an 8-year-old's intuition, and realized that he wanted to be a father more than he'd ever wanted any business deal. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his office early, determined to handle the fallout from canceling the Blackstone merger. David Chun was already waiting, along with a team of lawyers who had spent the night analyzing the contract in detail. You were right to be suspicious, David said without preamble. The more we dug into this agreement, the more problematic clauses we found. This wasn't a merger. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a partnership. How did we miss this initially? Marcus asked. Because they're very good at what they do, David replied. Blackstone has pulled this same maneuver with at least 3 other companies in the past 5 years. They identify successful businesses, approach them with seemingly generous merger offers, then use legal technicalities to take control once the contracts are signed. Marcus felt a chill as he realized how close he'd come to disaster. What's our exposure for backing out? Significant, but manageable. The cancellation penalties will cost about $50 million, and they'll probably sue for additional damages. But that's nothing compared to what you would have lost if you'd signed. The phone rang, and Sarah's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Wellington, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Marcus frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone, and he'd asked Sarah to clear his schedule for the morning. Who is it? She says her name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and she's from the FBI's Corporate Crimes Division. Marcus exchanged glances with David, who looked as surprised as he felt. Send her in. Dr. Vasquez was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. She was accompanied by a younger man who introduced himself as Agent Morrison. Mr. Wellington, Dr. Vasquez said, we understand you were scheduled to sign a merger agreement with Blackstone Enterprises this morning. That's correct, but the deal has been canceled, Marcus replied carefully. We're very glad to hear that, Agent Morrison said. We've been investigating Blackstone for the past 2 years as part of a larger probe into corporate fraud and racketeering. Marcus felt his blood run cold again, but this time it was with relief rather than fear. They're under federal investigation? They are, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. We have evidence that they've defrauded at least 6 companies using the same merger strategy they were planning to use with you. The problem is, their methods are technically legal, unethical and predatory, but legal. We've been trying to find a way to build a case against them. What changed your mind about the merger? Agent Morrison asked. Our sources indicated that you were fully committed to the deal as recently as yesterday. Marcus smiled, thinking of Emma's determined face as she'd shouted at him not to sign the papers. Let's just say I received some very good advice from an unexpected source. The agents exchanged glances. We'd like to ask you to consider working with us, Dr. Vasquez said. If you were willing to wear a wire and meet with Blackstone representatives, we might be able to get them to admit to their fraudulent practices on record. Marcus considered the request. The idea of helping to stop Blackstone from victimizing other companies was appealing, but it would also be dangerous. These people had already shown they were willing to use sophisticated legal manipulation to steal entire companies. I'll need to think about it, he said finally. Of course, Dr. Vasquez said, handing him a business card. But don't take too long. We believe they're already moving on to their next target. After the agents left, Marcus spent the rest of the morning dealing with the legal and financial implications of canceling the merger. The process was complicated and expensive, but every hour that passed made him more grateful that Emma had insisted he look closer at the contract. Around noon, Sarah buzzed him on the intercom. Mr. Wellington, Emma Rodriguez is here to see you. She says she has something important to tell you. Marcus smiled, his first genuine smile of the day. Send her in. Emma burst through the door, her face bright with excitement. She was wearing her school uniform and carrying a backpack decorated with cartoon characters. Marcus, she exclaimed, running around his desk to hug him. I heard on the news that you canceled the big business deal. Did I really help? You saved me, Emma, Marcus said, lifting her up and setting her on his desk. That contract would have cost me everything if I'd signed it. Emma beamed with pride. Abuela says that Mama is watching over us, and that's how I knew to tell you not to sign. Do you think that's true? Marcus looked into her earnest eyes and felt a certainty that surprised him. Yes, I think that's exactly what happened. Your mother loved you very much, and I think she wanted to make sure you were protected. And you too, Emma added. She wants you protected too, because you take care of me now. The simple logic of an 8-year-old, but it resonated with a truth that Marcus felt in his bones. Sofia Rodriguez had entrusted him with her daughter's care, and somehow, from beyond the grave, she was still looking out for both of them. Emma, Marcus said, I have something important to ask you. How would you feel about me becoming your dad officially? Not just someone who takes care of you, but your real father through adoption. Emma's eyes went wide, and for a moment Marcus worried he'd moved too fast. Then her face broke into the biggest smile he'd ever seen. Really? She whispered. You want to be my daddy for real? More than anything, Marcus said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Emma threw her arms around his neck, hugging him so tightly he could barely breathe. Yes, 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 she said, laughing and crying at the same time. I want that more than anything too. As Marcus held his soon-to-be daughter, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he'd been focused solely on building his business empire, measuring success only in terms of profit and market share. Tonight, he realized that true success was measured in moments like this, in the trust of a child, in the bonds of chosen family, in the courage to listen when someone you love warns you of danger. The Blackstone merger would have made him richer and more powerful, but it would have cost him everything that really mattered. Emma's intuition, her mother's protective spirit, and the love that had grown between them had saved him from a fate worse than financial ruin, the loss of his soul. Over the following weeks, Marcus worked closely with the FBI to build a case against Blackstone Enterprises. He wore a wire to several meetings, gathering evidence of their fraudulent practices. The investigation eventually led to multiple arrests and the recovery of hundreds of millions of dollars that had been stolen from other companies. The adoption process for Emma moved forward smoothly, with Maria Rodriguez's full support and blessing. Marcus hired the best family lawyers in the city to ensure everything was handled properly and quickly. On the day the adoption was finalized, Marcus stood in the courthouse with Emma by his side, both of them dressed in their finest clothes. The judge, an elderly woman with kind eyes, smiled down at them from the bench. "Emma Rodriguez," the judge said formally, "do you understand that Mr. Wellington wants to become your legal father, and that this means you will become Emma Wellington?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Yes, Your Honor, and I want that very much." "Mr. Wellington," the judge continued, "do you promise to love, protect, and care for Emma as your own daughter, to put her needs before your own, and to be the father she deserves?" "I do," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise." "Then by the power vested in me by the state, I hereby grant this petition for adoption. Emma, congratulations. You now have a legal father who loves you very much." Emma launched herself into Marcus's arms, and he spun her around as she laughed with pure joy. In the gallery, Maria Rodriguez wiped tears from her eyes, and Marcus's employees, who had become like extended family over the years, applauded and cheered. That evening, Marcus threw a celebration party at his penthouse. The same office where Emma had shouted at him not to sign those papers was now filled with laughter, music, and the people who mattered most to them both. Emma wore a beautiful dress that Marcus had bought specially for the occasion, and she spent the evening showing off her new adoption certificate to anyone who would look. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Marcus found himself alone with Emma on the balcony overlooking the city. The lights twinkled below them like earthbound stars, and the night air was warm and gentle. "Daddy," Emma said, the words still new and wonderful on her tongue. "Do you think Mama can see us right now?" Marcus looked up at the stars visible despite the city's glow. "I think she can, sweetheart, and I think she's very proud of both of us." Emma leaned against his side, small and warm and perfect. "I'm glad she made me have that bad dream," she said. "If she hadn't, you might have signed those papers, and then we couldn't be a real family." Marcus smiled, thinking about the chain of events that had led them to this moment. A child's nightmare, a mother's protective spirit, and the courage to listen to intuition over logic had saved them both from disaster and brought them to this perfect happiness. "Me too, Emma," he said, holding her close. "Me too." As they stood together on the balcony, father and daughter united by love and choice rather than blood, Marcus reflected on the lessons he'd learned. Success wasn't about accumulating wealth or power. It was about the people you chose to love and protect. Wisdom didn't always come from experience or education. Sometimes it came from the pure intuition of a child who saw the world more clearly than any adult. And sometimes, just sometimes, love was strong enough to transcend death itself, reaching across the void to protect those left behind. The merger documents that had nearly destroyed his life were now locked away in a safe, serving as a reminder of how close he'd come to losing everything that mattered. But they also served as a testament to the power of love, intuition, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Chosen family, the kind that matters most. Emma had saved him from more than just a bad business deal. She'd saved him from a life without love, without purpose, without the joy that came from putting someone else's needs before your own. In return, he'd given her stability, security, and the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally. It was, Marcus thought as he tucked his daughter into bed that night, the best deal he'd ever made. The story of how an 8-year-old girl's shout had saved a millionaire from disaster became something of a legend in business circles. Marcus never tired of telling it, always emphasizing that the real miracle wasn't Emma's intuition. It was the love that had made him listen to her. Years later, when Emma was older and could fully understand what had happened that night, she would ask Marcus if he ever regretted walking away from such a lucrative deal. His answer was always the same. The only thing he'd ever regretted was waiting so long to realize that she was the most important thing in his life. And sometimes, late at night when the city was quiet and the stars were bright, Marcus would stand on his balcony and whisper a thank you to Sofia Rodriguez, wherever she was. Thank you for trusting him with her daughter. Thank you for watching over them both. And thank you for making sure that love, in the end, conquered all. The rain that had seemed so ominous on the night Emma saved him now sounded peaceful when it fell against his windows. It no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a blessing, washing away the past and making room for a future filled with the kind of wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars or market share. The wealth of family, the wealth of love, the wealth of a little girl's trust and a mother's eternal protection. It was more than enough. It was everything.